How's it going, everybody? Jack's Journalism back with another video today, and we're going to be talking about the Alpha Draft Challenger League. Now, we're not actually going to be talking about the league itself, but rather the teams participating as part of a new video series where I'll be breaking down each one over the course of the 5 weeks that the league will be running. I'm going to be trying to do 1 to 2 videos per week until we've got all of them covered. And how this is going to work is towards the first week, which is actually already over with, but towards the beginning of the league, there's going to be a lot more speculation, a smaller sample size of games to work off of. But as it develops, hopefully the teams develop as well. Maybe some of the speculation and theory is realized, and there's the off chance we might get some kind of cool narrative storyline going on too. I mean, you've got big names in this tournament. You also have some really good up-and-comers, so it'll be exciting to talk about all of them. Hopefully, this will give you a good base to go off of when watching the games. The current casters do a really good job providing a level of backstory and insight that you often don't get with Challenger Series. So hopefully Alpha Draft Challenger League can really revolutionize the way you guys watch Challenger, and hopefully I can be a part of that. So today we're going to be talking about Crewcade. And Crewcade is a team that caught my eye due to a very distinct identity. They play very well around their AD carry Nubitar, and they can kind of make any composition look like a Protect the Hyper Carry composition, even if he's not playing a Hyper Carry. It's just the way the interactions work that this team does really well when they play around him. And then SYNRGY BBY in the mid laner, he is a very control mage heavy player that's not going to get on assassins and hard carry most of the time. So that kind of helps to this team composition and the way they play, where he is very willing to opt into that more supportive style. And I'm just impressed with this team because they do seem to have a good grasp on the current metagame. Their early game lane swaps are very efficient and will generally yield a lead on their side lanes. And then their aggressive jungler, Wiggly, he can really make things happen as those leads develop, and he facilitates a lot of their early game. Now I have to say, this is an early game team by far. There's no question about it. Their mid game is atrocious. It stems from lackluster vision control that really just leads to poor decision making, terrible shot calling. Their late game could use a lot of work, and their wins are pretty much made and broken by if they can win a team fight. If they can win a team fight, they can kill your towers while you're dead. That's no problem. There's no resistance. If they're left to try and out-rotate you, or trying to pick, honestly, they're picking their fights is pretty bad too, which team fights is like their biggest strength. But when it comes to the rotational game and late game scaling compositions, not really the best team. And I think that really both of their strengths and their weaknesses were highlighted this week out of their games, so I think that's kind of cool to watch. And I want to break down their games as well once I'm done talking about the players. But to talk a little bit more about the players, Wild Wang in the top lane, he's not one of those aggressive pocket pick carry style top laner. He doesn't seem like a Flares or a Kali Trolls. He seems more like a Haunter, where he will play tanks and he'll do it well. And this guy's flanks are really good. Like, he's been playing a lot of Scion. His team fight flanks are just, they catch the enemy team off guard so much. His peeling is really good for his carries, and he just has a big team fight presence. Wiggly, their jungler, one of the best early game junglers in the ADCL. I don't have a doubt about that. He has been kind of reserved in his champion pool. He's played Gragas 3 times and Nunu once, so we will have to see a little bit more come out from him. But his Gragas is scary, and I think that it will draw bans here shortly. And his Nunu, while they did lose on that, it was not directly his fault by any means. He did as much as he could throughout the early game. A, being Nunu, and B, with his lanes getting behind on their own. He did as much as he could, but Wiggly, I think, is going to be coming up big in the jungle role for some time. Their mid laner, talked a little bit about him, SYNRGY. He plays these control mages. He played 4 different champions in 4 different games from week 1. I never really see that as a strength, and I think that it's actually kind of weird considering that the team as a whole has this big identity, but SYNRGY so far seems to be a slight wild card, just in that you don't know exactly what he's going to play. When his picks work out for him, I mean, that would be great, but the fact that they're at a 50% consistency rate that's not the greatest right now. But not generally one to carry from taking over the lane, but he does have a decent teamfight presence on those control mages, and he does have something to offer in that role. Nubitar, he'll play most AD carries, but big ones for him are Jinx and Sivir. Jinx, I mean, he can have this late game impact on, especially with the protect the hyper carry composition. Sivir, they really know how to use Sivir to their advantage. I think that's probably one of Nubitar's best AD carries, just offering that utility in the engage and disengage potential with Sivir is really good. And Nubitar is a player that I can really respect his team fight positioning. That's honestly the biggest reason I like Crewcade, is because I like watching Nubitar in team fights. It's not always perfect, but he will do his damnedest to kite, to chase, to get every single auto attack that he can in a team fight. And not every AD carry will do that, so it's refreshing to see one that does, and it very much will carry Crewcade in team fights a lot of the time when he does this. Saturn, his support there's not a lot to say about Saturn. He's kind of like SYNRGY in that he's been playing different supports, doesn't really stick to one thing. Generally, his play hasn't really made a statement, but when his team needs him to play something, he'll play it. It'll look pretty reliable. We'll see if he develops a little bit more and has kind of a refined identity, but as of right now, he just kind of exists and he does what he needs to do, which is not bad considering the team dynamic. So now getting into their matches, I'll try and be quick with each match. Well, their first one was against Elomingle, former TSM Darkness. They did pick up a victory. The casters called it an upset. Not sure if I'd agree necessarily, but definitely one of the harder teams I guess they would have had to play this week. And they had a really good early game composition. They ran Sion, Gragas, Orianna, Lucian, Nautilus. They got the early game lane swap that they do very often. I guess this was the first time they really displayed it in ADCL though. So it was kind of the frame that they set for games to come, where they get this early lane swap off. They fast push the towers down. They take the outer ring, get a good gold lead. Because their side lanes got this lead in the lane swap, which by the way stems just as much from Wild Wang's performance as it is from their duo lane. I think that their lane swap efficiency comes more off the back of Wild Wang knowing how to play the 2v1 than the enemy top laner. But because they got their early game swaps, their jungler, which was actually a sub for Wiggly, he was able to put a lot of pressure mid lane. SYNRGY gets, decent gold income, generally farms up, didn't have much of a presence in the early game, but come team fights, go figure, the team does very well. But when it comes to those tier 2 towers and then that inhib line of towers, the team kind of falls apart. They do not play the mid to late game very well, and that showed in this game. They just could not find the right fight that they wanted, and I think that they got impatient. Nubitar, he plays very well when the team is supporting him, but he was playing really far up, so is SYNRGY. They were kind of trying to make some solo picks happen. Didn't work out for them, got caught, lost gold leads. in the end, they kind of reset, found the fight that they wanted. They pushed the towers down, got the win. Pretty cut and dry over Elomingle, and a good example of their strengths in a victory. Their second game against Cerberus, which is now Noble, so sorry if I bounce back from Noble to Cerberus, as I'm trying to remember which one is right. In this game, they really displayed their strengths and weaknesses. If you want to watch one game to sum up Crewcade from week one, their match versus Cerberus is the right one, because once again they ran an early game composition, this time with Wiggly returned as the jungler, so they've got the full strength of him on Gragas. They've got Wild Wang on Sion again. They've got SYNRGY on Victor, which raises a couple of question marks, considering his bursty nature in the current tank meta. It just didn't make the most sense to me when a lot of people have gravitated away from that champion. And then they had Sivir and I'm forgetting who Saturn played in this game. Saturn played Lulu. I keep forgetting that Saturn played Lulu in this game, but Sivir Lulu bot lane, so they have a lot of engage and disengage potential. They can just hit the go button and the team is ready to fight, they're ready to run. Well, once again, they get the early game swap off. The side lanes are doing phenomenally, right? Well, Wiggly just had an amazing early game on the Gragas. He showed that though Zazal could play it, he is the true Gragas king of Crewcade. And he made Rockin, Noble's mid laner, he made his life a living hell that game, because he would gank, force a flash, 45 seconds later he'd be right back, pick up the kill. And he got a pretty big lead for SYNRGY in the mid laner, or in the mid lane in this game. But Noble went with a very high scaling composition, and I don't remember the specifics. I think it was something like Maokai Sejuani, Kog'Maw AP, of course, and then Jinx Janna bot lane. So they had a lot of scaling on that composition, and when you factor in Crewcade's bad mid game, things just did not go in their favor. They generally played pretty well up until Noble's big spikes, but there were a couple misplays in there that did, I think, that could have saved them, but they just misplayed and they didn't do team fights well. This was the first kind of floundering I've seen from Saturn in his role, where SYNRGY, I mean, he would blow his load as Victor and then get ulted by Lulu, while Nubitar is like running away from Maokai trying to right click, and it's just like, what's happening in that team fight? You guys have this great AD carry and you're ulting a burst champion that has no more damage, and just some disjointed fighting coming out from them. But still, overall, a great early game. Can't fault them for that. Can fault them for their bad mid game. Took the loss to Noble. Moving into their third game, this time against SYNRGY, once again the team had a sub, only this time it was a much more crucial sub, because their AD carry, Nubitar, was gone. They had this guy named I'm AVI. I don't know much about him. I think the casters were saying that he's the team analyst, so no all-star player coming in here, but could still just fit the role that they needed. They went with, once again, another early game composition. Sion for Wild Wang, Gragas for Wiggly. This time, I really wanted to see SYNRGY off of one of those range control mages and onto something that would carry, and I wanted to see him carry. And I was actually really happy to see that he picked up Ahri, which he did exactly that. And then Saturn, I believe, was on Janna or Nautilus. I think it was Janna. Overall, just a strong early game composition, and they got off the ground with their lane swap. They didn't get anything in the lanes themselves, but once SYNRGY hit 6, he used his mobility on Ahri. He was all over the map, went top lane, picked up some kills, went back to his lane, picked up another kill. SYNRGY was putting the early game on his back with Wiggly's assistance in game 3, and I was really happy. I was like, is this another dimension of Crewcade? Like, are we going to see SYNRGY hard carry and maybe transition such a hard carry into a better mid game? And the answer was absolutely not. This team, they gave up, I believe they gave up a free dragon or two. They gave up a free baron, a 3-man baron, with absolutely no vision when they had a couple thousand gold lead, which was really bad. But the biggest thing, and I don't know if Zerg BBY is the shot caller for this team, but there's a direct correlation in Game 3 from where Zerg BBY was doing some really dumb shit. The rest of the team was doing really dumb stuff too. And Zerg BBY, his team fight presence, after like, I don't even remember what time it was exactly. Maybe after like 25 minutes or so, maybe 30 minutes. Zerg BBY's teamfight presence was that he had no teamfight presence. This Ahri that had completely dominated the early game, though to be fair, was being Nautilus ulted at the beginning of every fight, found absolutely no advantages. Like, she got no solo picks. She got no meaningful damage in team fights, and maybe I'm over-exaggerating a little bit, but really Ahri was kind of a non-factor, and the team defaulted to playing around their AD carry, in which case I'm AVI stepped up really big on the Graves, because he was solo killed in lane by the enemy AD carry Zayon. So the fact that he turned that around and ended up hard carrying the team fights was very good for Crewcade, and they ended up taking the win over SYNRGY. And then their last game of the week against Fang Gaming, that one was probably their toughest match. That was their first real test. Fang Gaming is a very experienced roster and individually stacked. Well, this game did not go in their favor, and it was for a couple of reasons. It was kind of upsetting to see because they had Nubitar back. They had no subs in the lineup. It was the clear lineup, and they tried out some different things. And I mean, if they're gonna try out new stuff, the first week is definitely the best time to do it. But what they did was they went full late game with kind of a cute composition. They went Jinx for the late game, Azir mid for the late game, a Nunu jungle to blood boil both of those with I believe it was Janna support from Saturn, but a Yorick on Wild Wang to bring them back in team fights. So in theory, this composition was really cool, and I was like hoping it would work, but given their late game track record, I was just like, no chance. But then the other thing that kind of baffled me was they didn't lane swap, and I'm thinking they didn't lane swap because they wanted the Yorick versus Hecarim matchup. They did expect Yorick to win that 1v1 in the top lane, which unfortunately he didn't. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got Lucian Janna. It was actually Thresh that Saturn was playing in that game, because they were playing Thresh Jinx into Lucian Janna. And their bottom lane, who usually does so well, got first blooded 2v2, no junglers, because of that matchup. And the fact that they choose this game of all times where they need to just like get gold early, stall out, or get as much gold early as they can, stall out, that they decided not to lane swap, that was very confusing. And then the other thing was Wiggly just didn't have the same kind of impact, and like I said, it's not really his fault, but the side lanes that usually get ahead were not ahead. They were both behind, and he was trying to help out those side lanes, to which he actually did. He ended up getting a pretty good lead for Nubitar in the end, or just substantial gold onto Nubitar in the end. Meanwhile, you've got Zerg BBY completely flailing in the mid game, or in the mid lane. His Azir was, I mean, nothing very relevant. He had flashes of good team fighting, but in lane he was not able to get any kind of edge, and I think that's one of those exploitable weaknesses I was talking about, is just that Zerg BBY individually is not the most skilled, and he really needs Wiggly to facilitate that lead for him. So that last game was a pretty cut and dry loss. I think they probably did end up learning a decent amount from it, though, and it should give them a decent base going into game 2, just finishing week 2 rather, just finishing 2-2 on week 1. So I don't think they're too cut up about it. But Good stuff overall from Crewcade during week one. Hate to end it on that low note of losing to Fang, but like I said, this team gave me a reason to be to just be interested, to be like, oh hey, what's Crewcade gonna play this time around? Like, is Nubitar gonna go off? Will ZergBBY step up to the carry role? Um, like what junglers can Wiggly play? There are a lot of good questions about this team. Wild Wang has a lot of potential in the top lane, and I'm hoping that we see good things from them. So definitely check out Crewcade's matches. Once again, as I always used to say in my videos, if you have any comments, suggestions, whatever, just let me know. If 20 minutes of me rambling about a challenger team is just completely boring and it's terrible, let me know. Like, if enough people think it's bad, I just won't do it, I'll switch up the formula, but my goal at the end of the day is to just give you guys stuff that's entertaining and informative and contributes to the challenger scene. So hopefully I've done that with this video today. Look out for every other team. Hopefully your favorite team's coming up soon, and definitely tune into the Alpha Draft Challenger League. Until next time, I will see you guys later.